Danis stood by the kitchen window, gloomily gazing at the snow-covered yard. Snowdrifts covered children's swings, and there were slides and benches in the snow. The winter morning was dark. The street lamps hadn't yet gone out and illuminated the icy paths. People hurried about their early business. Denis had taken a day off from work today to take his wife to the hospital. Svetlana, his love, whom he met in the first year of university and had no intention of letting go. She was expecting a child and was already 8 months pregnant. At first, the pregnancy went smoothly, but then, after seeing the latest test results, doctors suspected complications and wanted to admit her to the hospital. Svetlana, of course, didn't want that. She didn't want to spend New Year's in a hospital room. However, Denis insisted that it was better to listen to the doctors. He promised Svetlana to take her home on New Year's Eve, like Cinderella rushing to the ball. It was the end of December on the calendar. New Year's was approaching. However, there was no festive atmosphere in apartment 33. Denis felt the ominous premonition. He tried to push it away, but it spread through his body, settling in his lungs and permeating his entire being. And it wasn't just about his pregnant wife's condition. The problem was Mrs. Lisa, who occupied the spare room in their old apartment. Aunt Lisa was seriously ill. From a cheerful and smiling beauty, she had turned into a black shadow. The disease, like an invisible enemy, consumed her body and soul, turning each of her days into a difficult battle. The outlines of emaciated bones peeped through her thin skin, and the fragility of her figure made her appearance even more delicate and helpless. Her eyes, which once sparkled with joy and light, now reflected only darkness and fatigue. Their sparkle had dimmed, like a fading star in the sky. They told a story of pain through the faded gaze. Her lips were cracked, resembling parched soil thirsty for moisture. The expression on her face indicated that the woman was holding on with her last strength. It physically hurt Denis to look at his aunt. Even more terrifying was the realization that she was beyond saving. Svetlana silently went to the kitchen, approached Denis from behind, hugged him, and pressing against his chest, said with a tearful voice, "Good morning." Denis smiled, turned to his wife, and kissing her forehead replied, "Good morning. Ready to go?" The woman frowned and said melancholically, "Well, maybe not." Denis lightly tapped his wife's nose with his finger and said, "I say we should." Svetlana nodded, then yawned. "I'd sell my soul for a cup of coffee," she confessed. "Doctors forbade coffee, and I don't allow selling souls," reminded the man. "I'll make you tea with milk." "Denis, you're unbearable," Svetlana said playfully. Of course, she was joking. On the contrary, she greatly appreciated her husband's care. Denis not only monitored Svetlana's diet, but also tried to pamper her with fruits and gifts, or took on numerous household chores to help his wife. He endured her emotional mood swings and fulfilled all her whims. Before leaving for the hospital, Denis decided to visit Mrs. Lisa's room. She usually woke up earlier than everyone else. However, today, it was quiet behind the door. "Mrs. Lisa, are you awake? Why haven't you turned on the light?" Denis asked, entering his relative's bedroom. Mrs. Lisa didn't say a word, only emitted a muffled groan, sounding as if from a distant past. In response to this sound, Denis felt his blood chill and his heart instantly contracted with worry. "Aunt Lisa," he exclaimed again, this time with a noticeable increase in anxiety in his voice. In the dark room, a nightly silence reigned. His shouts seemed indecently loud. Suddenly, there was the creaking of the bed and the rustling of the blanket. It was a sound that brought a wave of relief crashing down on Denis. His heart, which a moment ago seemed icy, now started beating again, and each beat was a monotonous chorus of gratitude. Mrs. Lisa was alive, and this fact illuminated his soul with the light of hope. He slowly approached the bed where Aunt Lisa sat, taking her trembling hand. She looked at him with a pale gaze. "Denis, I'm tired, I guess. I'll lie down a bit more," she replied softly. "Svetlana and I are leaving. Maybe you'll have some breakfast?" the nephew asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. In the dim room, he saw the woman's lips tremble in an attempt to smile. "Thank you, dear. No appetite," she confessed. Denis nodded, growing even gloomier. A couple of days ago, Mrs. Lisa was still moving around the apartment, and once she even got up at dawn and miraculously prepared breakfast for everyone. At some point, Dennis even thought she was getting better, and now her condition had worsened again. He wanted to get up and leave, but she unexpectedly held his hand firmly, keeping him in place, and said, "Dennis." Before continuing this story, I recommend subscribing to my channel and giving this video a like. Thank you very much. Let's keep going. Maybe you'll take me too. I don't want to trouble you with my departure from life. It's hard for me. It would be better it could happen in the hospital. Dennis frowned. He and Aunt Lisa, along with his wife, had already discussed this. Doctors said they couldn't help. Even if they admitted Mrs. Lisa to the hospital, they would only subject her to useless examinations. Dennis didn't want strangers around his aunt in her last days, people who didn't care about her. Don't talk nonsense. The new year is ahead. A gift is waiting for you under the tree. So come on, gather strength, the nephew said, adjusting the aunt's blanket, and then kissed her tired hand. Anything you want me to bring you? Aunt Lisa thought for a moment, then nodded. You know, Dennis, I was thinking, I'd like a pastry. Remember, after my work, we always went to the same bakery. They had cookies with cream. Maybe they still sell them. Dennis smiled. Of course, I'll bring them. I promise. Then, picking up his wife's bags and holding Svetlana's arm, he took the pregnant woman to the hospital. Long waiting, paperwork, farewells, and now he was heading home from the bakery. On the passenger seat lay the pastries, neatly packed in a beautiful box with a ribbon. On the way home, Dennis couldn't help but glance at the treat and reminisce about his childhood. What would it have been like if not for Aunt Lisa? She became his guiding light in the impenetrable darkness. Aunt Lisa was not just a relative. She became a true beacon in the darkness of life for Dennis. With her care and affection, every day became an adventure, and difficulties seemed less frightening. She replaced his biological mother. Dennis was now 27 years old. He was building his own family. However, he could never forget his aunt's act, saving him from life in an orphanage. The thing was, Dennis's father was unknown. His mother became pregnant while still a student. Her parents were greatly angered by it. They said she had disgraced them. How could it be that a young girl, instead of a red diploma, brought them a child? Moreover, she became a single mother. They even wanted to take their daughter to the hospital to get rid of this problem in a drastic way. However, the term was too long, and doctors refused to perform an abortion. Then, Helen's cousin, Lisa, sided with her. She was older and already had a job, and her heart was very kind. The woman started helping her sister, supporting her. She spoke with the relatives, convincing them that the child could not be a punishment. It was a gift. Dennis well remembered how Aunt Lisa used to come to them with his mom when he was 3 or 4. She brought treats and took them to caves. By that time, she was already earning well. When Aunt Lisa got married, she visited less frequently. However, she still missed her nephew. Her husband, Nikita, turned out to be a wonderful person. They and Lisa dreamed of having their own son or daughter. However, the miracle did not happen. It turned out that Lisa couldn't have her own children. All her love she began to give to her cousin's nephew. When Dennis turned 5, he got a stepfather. He turned out to be stubborn and jealous. At first, the man didn't want his wife to spend her time and attention on the child. Once you give birth to a child, son or daughter, you'll deal with him. And your grown-up one. No need to run after him, he declared to his wife. It's better for me to iron the shirt. A year later, Dennis got a newborn sister. The stepfather disliked the boy even more, was intensely jealous, and believed that his wife should take care of his biological daughter. There were frequent arguments in the apartment. The stepfather constantly scolded and punished Dennis with harsh words for the slightest mistake. It seemed that he was irritated even by the way Dennis breathed. To ease the tension in the family, Helen started sending her son to visit her sister and her husband more often. They lived in a village, quite far from the city. Initially, the child's parents sent him to the village only for weekends, explaining that they needed to attend to matters, and dealing with 2 children was difficult. Then the weekends extended to weeks because traveling from the distant village to the city was problematic, and later the duration increased even more. Lisa, however, was happy to host the boy. Nikita also had nothing against children. He genuinely loved him. Well, if God didn't send them their own children, they were happy with Dennis. The boy was happy during visits to his aunt and uncle. They walked a lot and played board games. In Aunt Lisa and Uncle Nikita's house, he didn't bother anyone. No one shouted at him, telling him to be quieter. On the contrary, Aunt Lisa called the boy to help her make dough for his favorite apple pies and decorate them with flaky leaves. Uncle Nikita took the boy fishing. Of course, the boy didn't want to return to the house with the cruel stepfather, but after a couple of weeks, maternal instincts would kick in for Helen, and she would take her son home, only until the next conflict. Dennis remembered crying, clinging to his aunt's hand, resenting her, thinking she didn't want to keep him close. Aunt Lisa, on the other hand, turned away because she, too, was barely holding back tears. Of course, Lisa worried about her nephew, but could she take the son away from his mother? However, fate arranged everything accordingly. When Dennis turned 7, his mother Helen passed away. She died a couple of months later. The illness was detected too late. The stepfather immediately got rid of the child, claiming that he wouldn't raise someone else's son. "I already have a daughter to take care of," he said. "Why do I need someone else's son? Let his biological father look for him." Grandma and Grandpa also refused the grandson. They said they wouldn't take care of an unruly and illegitimate child. They wanted to live for themselves. The threat of the orphanage hung over the boy. Then Lisa, after consulting with her husband, arranged guardianship. To speak like that about a nephew was rude and strange, but now Dennis understood that after his biological mother's death, his life changed for the better. Unfortunately, that was a fact. Adoptive parents gave the child everything: love, care, upbringing, education. The boy, who studied law, decided to change his life and move from the secluded village to the bustling city. He gradually built a successful career in the legal field, proving himself as a talented and ambitious professional. After several years of living in the city, the boy met his love, Svetlana. Their relationship progressed, and eventually, they decided to start a family. However, life has its difficult moments. At some point, the boy learned that his uncle Nikita had passed away. This loss had a significant impact on his emotional state. Dennis, arriving for the funeral, immediately suggested to his aunt to leave with him to the city. However, she refused, not wanting to interfere with the young family. And then, after some time, more bad news arrived. Aunt Lisa fell ill. She fell ill just like her sister Helen. However, her ailment was detected earlier, so there was a chance for recovery. This time, Dennis did not ask for his aunt's opinion and took her with him to the city. Aunt Lisa, this is not up for discussion, Dennis exclaimed when he came to his aunt's apartment to pack her bags. "In the city, there is an excellent hospital. We will cure you. And in your village, there are 2 clinics for all people, treating with primitive methods." Aunt Lisa didn't argue and agreed to the move. However, despite Dennis's efforts to fight for her health, saving the woman proved unsuccessful. Soon, doctors threw up their hands and told Dennis there would be no miracle. Therefore, the young man could only hope that Aunt Lisa would stay with them a little longer. Dennis hoped that she would still spend this new year with them and drink champagne, which she loved so much. He hoped she would see his daughter, maybe even hold her in her arms. However, his hopes were shattered very soon. When Dennis returned to the apartment and entered his aunt's room, the box of pastries slipped from his hands. He immediately understood that Aunt Lisa was not sleeping. He didn't tell his wife anything. He was afraid to upset the expectant mother. Later, Svetlana would be very angry when she found out that he didn't bring her to the funeral of his aunt and experienced the loss alone. However, Dennis vividly remembered his aunt's words spoken once: "A pregnant woman has no place at the cemetery. Svetlana should be experiencing happiness, not sorrow. Take care of her," she said. The man invited all relatives and friends he could find to Aunt Lisa's funeral. What a shock it was when no one showed up. Aunt Lisa was a kind person. Unfortunately for her, bad people tended to take advantage of the kindness of women. Even when she could work, she often covered for her colleagues at the factory. Although, were they really her friends? They would skip work for personal matters or dates, but they never helped Aunt Lisa. They borrowed money, dresses, and cosmetics from her, rarely returning them. And now, they didn't come to another city to bid her farewell. And as for relatives, Dennis knew that now distant relatives lived in Aunt Lisa's old apartment in the village. Cousin Jean, whom he rarely saw. She lived there not alone, but with her husband and daughter. They lived there illegally, never giving Aunt Lisa money for rent. Dennis remembered well how this story began. First, in Aunt Lisa's life, there appeared a student, Marina. She tearfully asked Aunt Lisa to share accommodation. She claimed to have enrolled in a university near the village. Despite the fact that the out-of-town girl was entitled to a room in the dormitory, she quickly moved into the apartment of the distant relative. At first, they lived together. However, when Aunt Lisa fell ill, the student stayed alone in the apartment. But not for long. As soon as Lisa left, like roaches to a fallen piece of bread, the girl's parents sneaked into the apartment. It turned out they didn't have their own place. The couple was renting a tiny room, so they arrived uninvited. Initially, they promised Aunt Lisa to pay the minimum rent. Aunt asked for a little. After all, she needed money. Medicines were expensive, and she thought of spending her savings on the funeral. Besides, she didn't want to rely on her nephew. They always said they would pay soon. Then they began to invent sad tales about their difficult financial situation. "Let's postpone the payment," Jean said. "Right now, my husband is having problems at work. Why don't you get a job?" Lisa asked. "I'm trying, but I can't find anything," Jean mumbled. Another time, she told a fabricated story about her own illness, preventing her from working and paying rent. Later, she argued that a lot of money went to her daughter and final exams, as she was almost expelled, and then Jean became pregnant, making the situation even more complex. The family budget was now spent on her baby. Dennis didn't like this situation at all. As a lawyer, he wanted to deal with the impudent relatives himself, possibly even legally. However, Lisa asked him not to do it. Let them live a bit longer. After all, the family was large, and a little child appeared. Lisa asked her nephew not to worry about her aunt. Besides, he had other concerns, and after bidding farewell to Aunt Lisa, Dennis inherited the very apartment in the village with an outdated repair. Dennis didn't immediately enter into the inheritance rights. First, he spent time with his wife, holding the newborn son, and then, after 3 months, he came to the familiar village to formalize the necessary documents and see those relatives. Dennis didn't think there would be any problems. How wrong he was. It turned out that human audacity knows no bounds. The man booked a hotel room and then planned to visit the apartment. He had the keys, but he didn't want to break into a place where strangers lived. Therefore, he called first, but Jean didn't answer the phone, not even on the 5th call. Dennis had little time, so we came to visit in person. Nobody opened the door even after knocking. Then Dennis, with a heavy heart, took out the key and tried to turn it in the lock. Unfortunately, it didn't work. "What's this? Strange," he muttered. Examining the door, the man noticed that the lock had been replaced with a new one. This unexpected turn displeased him, and his already grim expression deepened. Suddenly, he decisively started banging on the door with his fist, expressing his dissatisfaction with the situation. Despite his loud knocks, the door remained closed. However, at some point, the man heard approaching steps, and soon a female voice came from behind the door. "Stop banging." "Anyway, I won't open it," Jean declared. Dennis was shocked. "What do you mean you won't open it?" "Jean, what a kindergarten. It's me, Dennis. I know who you are," Jean muttered. "But you have no business here, got it? We won't let you in. We've been living in this apartment for a long time, so it's practically ours." "How is it yours?" Dennis snorted, still thinking they were joking. "It belonged not only to your aunt, but also to my brother. You understand. So I have a right to it, even more than you." Dennis's jaw literally dropped. He tried to compose himself and speak calmly. "First of all, Jean, can you open the door? Why should I talk to you through the keyhole? Neighbors will be out soon. I assure you, I didn't come here to argue or force you out." Jean's heart raced unevenly as she heard the knocking and unfamiliar words through the door. Confusion and caution reflected on her face. She slowly opened the door. The man stood with an air of humble determination, trying to convey his sincerity through words. Jean's eyes expressed a mix of curiosity and indecision. However, realizing there were no hostile intentions, she opened the door, letting the man in. At the moment the door swung wide open, tension in the air became palpable. She was wearing a housecoat and scowled at the unexpected guest, saying, "Speak faster. I have a child who will wake up soon," she grumbled. Dennis understood that small talk wouldn't work. He stepped inside but didn't venture further than the threshold. "Let's get straight to the point," the man said. I suggest you sign a lease agreement. But this time, it would be better if you actually abide by it, especially since I won't trust you on just your word. Everything will be documented. You can live here as long as you want, just pay regularly. What kind of contract? Jean protested. The most ordinary one. The man shrugged. I don't plan to set a high rent, don't worry. The price is stated in the documents. Take a look. The price is fair and reasonable. Of course, utility bills remain your responsibility. What? Jean shouted and even stumbled back. I don't understand. Why should I pay you? If you don't want to pay rent, feel free to buy the apartment and use it, Dinas calmly suggested. I checked the local market prices, so I'll sell it to you as relatives for 30% less. It will be $1.5 million. Jean's face comically stretched out. It seemed like another second, and her jaw would drop, hitting the floor like in cartoons. Dinas looked at her with the absolute calm of an experienced lawyer. Jean finally stopped looking at him and replied, Get out, do you understand? You have no right to this apartment. I'll take you to court. Got it. You'll see. Scaring a lawyer with a lawsuit seemed strange and comical to Dinas. He even smiled. Actually, by law, the apartment belongs to me, Dinas responded gently. Moreover, originally, it belonged to my aunt's parents, and your brother, Uncle Nikita, moved in with his wife after the wedding. The property was never jointly acquired, so if you do decide to take this to court, be prepared to lose. You'll also have to cover the legal expenses. Jean didn't want to hear Dennis's arguments. Cursing, she pushed him out of the apartment, slamming the door loudly, causing the plaster in the hallway to fall. Dennis sighed heavily. Upon leaving the building, he regretfully called his wife, explaining that he would be delayed. Unlike his aunt, Dennis wasn't kind to the whole world and had no intention of letting ungrateful people walk all over him, especially when they didn't even come to bid farewell to his aunt, but desired to inherit her estate. At first, Dennis tried to resolve everything amicably. However, it was futile. Legal proceedings commenced, and on the third hearing, the judge rendered a verdict. If the family wanted to continue living in the apartment, they should either sign a contract on the new owner's terms or vacate. The court's decision shocked the family. Still, Jean refused to acknowledge defeat. She decided to approach Dinas differently. The woman ran to him immediately after the court session. She clutched his arm, looked into his eyes, and said, Dennis, please think about it. Don't you have a conscience? You live in the metropolis in a luxurious apartment, but we have nothing. A family of 4, and Marina with her husband will be here soon. We really need this apartment, especially since I have a small child in my arms. She licked her dry lips and tightened her grip on Dennis's wrist. Don't you have a child of your own? Don't you understand how difficult this is? Will you really throw us out onto the street? She said with a worried expression, trying to convey the essence of her words to Dinas. Unfortunately, his heart remained unmoved. You're talking about a conscience too late, he said irritably. Why didn't you and your family think about conscience when you moved into someone else's apartment, not giving a penny to the dying Liz? Jean bit her lip, unable to find an answer within herself. Dinas continued, Yes, I have a newborn, and after giving birth, my wife developed health problems. She won't be able to work for a very, very long time, so the money from selling the apartment won't hurt us. And I'm not going to sacrifice my family's comfort for people I find repulsive. Saying this, he turned around and walked away. Soon, the family moved out of the apartment. Wanting to somehow retaliate against Dinas, they took many belongings, but he no longer cared. He decided not to remember these people. Dennis successfully sold the apartment for a good price. With the money they earned, they bought land outside the city and began building their dream home. It was a project realized with love and hard work, where every brick was infused with their shared hopes for happiness. Together, they overcame challenges, creating their secluded haven where the laughter of beloved children echoed. As for Aunt Liz, the woman who replaced his mother, Dennis kept a special place for her in his heart. Every week, he brought flowers to her grave. He also never forgot to bring Aunt Liz her favorite cream-filled pastries. They weren't just treats, they were something important that brought him back to his childhood. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this story. Write your opinion in the comments and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.